All right. Hello, party people. My name is Randall Hunt, and I'm joined today by Brian Tarbox, who's AWS Community Hero, AWS Ambassador now as well. And we are going to be walking through all of the announcements at reInvent. Brian is going to be along the side answering questions in the various chat streams that we have. If a question comes up and I'm not able to answer it, I've got some helpful folks who are going to raise their hands on the side and be like, hey, Randall, go answer this question. All right. Brian, anything else you want to add?
Nope, sounds good. It's like buckle up, folks. This is going to be intense.
All right. So, first of all, it's important to say that this deck does not come into being from me or any individual. This is a collaboration between a number of different people at AWS, a number of different people at Kalen, and a number of different people in the AWS community as a whole. So, uh, with that said, let us jump in. First, a little bit about me. Oh, sorry. Just got to switch screens here. So my name is Randall. I'm VP Cloud at Kalen. I've spent the last, I probably need to update the slide, but I've spent the last, couple decades of my life on software. I started out working in video games, and then I ended up moving into a couple of startups in space and worked at AWS for many years. And I primarily focus on Python and C++, but definitely been very focused on machine learning and AI, generative AI specifically recently. And of course, I love serverless and databases. Outside of work, you can find me on Twitter. It is still called Twitter. It is not called X. Anyone who tells you otherwise is selling something. And with that said, let me go ahead and just jump right in. So, we're going to cover initially generative AI and machine learning because I feel like that's what everyone is particularly interested in right now. Next, we're going to go through some global infrastructure updates. This is something that I include in all the recap decks. I try to do this once a year. And then we'll go into compute, networking, storage, security, databases, developer tools, and app development. So these are going to maybe retouch on a couple of the other things that we're going to see in the other sections. We'll talk through management and governance improvements that were announced either at pre-invent or at reInvent itself. We'll dive into the analytics workloads, Amazon Connect, very brief interlude into IoT, a very brief interlude into quantum computing, talk through migrations and AWS partners. We will probably skip some of the migration and AWS partners discussions just because of time. There are 181 slides in this deck. And again, huge thank you to the AWS partner community, to AWS, and to all the people at Kalen that worked on these slides. With that said, let's get going. All right. When it comes to generative AI, we need to think about the stack that exists within AWS. At the bottom layer, we have our infrastructure. These are the things that we use for either FM training or fine tuning or inference. Two key things that I want to call out. One is Trainium. Trainium 2 came out at reInvent this year. This is significantly improved capability for building large language models. It has much more memory. It's more efficient even. And then also Inferentia. So this is, again, custom silicon from AWS. Inf2 instances have proven to be very useful for a number of different workloads. They are not the perfect fit for every single kind of model, but for many models, they are great, and you can get tremendous price performance improvements. These models, when you're deploying them on custom silicon, you have to use the Neuron SDK. So this is something that will take your model and compile it to work on that specific silicon. Additionally, AWS announced SageMaker Ultra clusters, which we'll dive into later, and additional GPU instances. Finally, Elastic Fabric Adapter is a way for you to have significant kind of networking throughput between clustered instances, and it's pretty powerful. It uses things like SRD, which we'll dive into a little later as well. Also, EC2 capacity blocks, so you can register a time period and reserve a set of GPU instances for that time period. And then moving up from that core infrastructure, we have the bedrock layer. So this is sort of the, if SageMaker is the family for traditional machine learning infrastructure, Bedrock is the layer for, let's say, generative AI infrastructure. And it has a couple capabilities that were released in GA at reInvent. One was agents, guardrails was another, and then additional customization capabilities, which we'll talk through. One layer up from that is Amazon Q. So Amazon Q is both a service and a brand for AWS. So it is a combination of individual services as well as a set of injection points for generative AI into different businesses. So we'll talk about that later. And I'm just making sure everything is looking good from a tech perspective. Everyone can see the slides, no issues, right? All good. Okie dokie. So, the easiest, so Bedrock, if there's also going to be QR codes throughout this, these should go to either the blog post for the release, or they should go to the what's new post for the release. In the case where they're not QR codes, there are links in this deck that I can share if necessary. So Bedrock has 21 different providers. Some of them can be privately customized. There's now a retrieve and query API. Agents can now execute tasks fulfilled by Lambda functions. There's the new model evaluation, which allows automatic and human-based evaluation of models. There are guardrails. This is in preview, as well as additional capabilities around security, privacy, and safety. So in terms of models, we've spent quite a bit of time experimenting with the various models, and we found that Llama 2, the 70 billion parameter model, which was released right around reInvent timeframe, very, very powerful. Anthropic Claude 2.1 is still probably the most capable model that we've experienced. So we use that in a lot of workloads. It has a 200K context. It's got really great precision recall of that context window as well. And you can further enhance it with some additional prompt engineering techniques. Cohere, we found, is very good for their embeddings. So we haven't really leveraged at Kaylant the Cohere command or other models as heavily as we haven't leveraged their embeddings. They're especially good in the multilingual embeddings as well. And then Jurassic is also a player in this space. Amazon Bedrock allows you to fine tune, but they also announced at reInvent continuous pre-training. The way to think about the customization of these is that fine tuning is when you will upload a series of JSON lines files that will have an input and an output. That input and output will be used to basically customize and fine tune the model, whereas continuous pre-training is introducing new tokens and capabilities into the model by taking basically tokens that exist in your data set and your domain and throwing those into the model. This is sort of unsupervised learning, whereas the fine tuning is more of a supervised learning technique. And you don't need for continuous pre-training, you should think of it as, for every parameter the model has, you need, 1,000 tokens or so. That's sort of the metric that we've been using at Kaylant. But for fine tuning, you can work with just a few number of examples. One important note is when you use continuous pre-tuning or when you use fine tuning, you do have to purchase what's called a model compute unit to access and deliver those customized models. The pricing entry point for these can be a little prohibitive. That said, if you are doing this at scale, the model compute units do offer better price performance than just the on-demand models. Okay, skipping right along in terms of speed here. Knowledge bases for Bedrock went generally available at reInvent, and this is the ability to point to things like vector search for OpenSearch Serverless, Redis, Pinecone. There's some additional resources that were announced at reInvent that are coming soon as well. And it's the ability to kind of go and in one network round trip, go to the Bedrock API, say, hey, convert my query or my prompt into a set of embeddings, use those embeddings to retrieve relevant documents or information from the store, and then synthesize a response based on all of that information. So instead of you having to do that manually from your compute layer and say, hey, I'm going to do this one call at a time, you can now do that through that query and retrieve API. It's pretty powerful so far. We've really enjoyed playing with the API, and I would recommend if you had previously tried this out in preview to give it another try now. Agents for Bedrock. So this is the ability to write an open API schema, sometimes called a Swagger. You define the set of things that a agent needs to, the set of criteria and parameters that an agent needs in order to be able to go and fulfill a request. And then a Lambda function will take that set of information that is from that open API schema and use that to fulfill the intent and return. This is very, very powerful, and I look forward to incorporating this into a number of different solutions. We also got multimodal embeddings. If you think about what a multimodal embedding means, it is the ability to take not just text data, but also image data and compare them semantically. So imagine you have a picture of a cat, a tawny cat, and then a picture of a different kind of cat. They would both correspond to a search for cat from the embedding space. This is really powerful, and we're really excited to try it out. Um, there are certain things to keep in mind when it comes to using embeddings. You want to optimize for your specific task and your recall. So sometimes if the output vector of an embedding is too large, you can't use certain data stores with it, or if the output vector is too small, you're not getting enough specificity. So definitely experiment and examine all of the different API results that are available to you, rather than just picking one and saying this is what we're going to use. Titan Text Lite and Titan Express are out and generally available as of reInvent. There was also the launch of Amazon Titan Image Generator. This is in preview. We've been playing around with it at Kalen, and we found that it is really, really powerful. It does struggle with human faces. So other than that, it's been pretty impressive so far, and we look forward to continuing to work with it. There were additional capabilities around the releases of responsible AI. One of those is that the image generator, the Titan image generator, has an invisible watermark that's designed to help reduce the spread of misinformation. And they haven't disclosed exactly how all of that works, but it's very interesting because as we move into this era, it's going to be more and more important to sort of understand what's going on with some of these AIs. Okie dokie. We also got guardrails for Amazon Bedrock in preview. This is the ability to go out and write certain capabilities into the model that will not go and return to the customer or the end user of an inference, things that you want to avoid. So if you think about offering investment advice, or let's say you have an HR bot that scans an FAQ, maybe it's built using the Lex Q&A intent, but it's going and talking to that knowledge base and then trying to return content for a customer. But you don't want that to say, oh, this is how you fill out your W-2, because there's certain risk associated with that. So you could have guardrails in that say, oh, this has, please reach out to hr@kalen.com in order to go and figure out the rest of this. There's also model evaluation on Bedrock. This is when you can use predefined or custom metrics, or human or automatic evaluation of the models. And you'll see here that there's a couple different scales. One of the things that I would love to see from AWS on this is actually radar charts of capabilities, because capabilities perform differently. So, a Llama 2 might have better SQL generation than, say, Claude Instant does. But maybe the Claude Instant is better at narrative structure than, say, Llama 2 13 billion. And so I think when you're measuring and modeling the capabilities of these models, it's really important to understand not just the underlying throughput and performance and size of the context window, but also the individual capabilities of these models, because they do differ, and it is important to use the right model for the right job. Party Rock is a great way to experiment with models. And then we got a number of new releases from CodeWhisperer. So I'm just going to double check to see if there's any questions or anything so far. I don't see anything yet. Just going to make a couple changes on my notifications here, because apparently there are questions and I'm not seeing them. Oops. Okay, there we go. Cool. So CodeWhisperer got a number of new capabilities. The code suggestions improved for infrastructure tools like Terraform and CDK. There's also it was already available in Visual Studio Code, but it is now also available in Visual Studio. And it got support for a number of different popular CLIs. Now, one of the things that the Amazon team did, which I thought was a brilliant move, is they acquired a company called Fig. And the Fig team is now rolled under the CodeWhisperer brand. And you can now just type in your CLI something like CW space AI, or write me a bash script to delete all of my SageMaker Canvas instances. And it will go and it will do that for you. So Fig was the tool that really enabled a lot of that. And so congratulations to the Fig team, and I look forward to your continued releases. Then we have Amazon Q. Like I said, Amazon Q is both a service in and of itself, as well as a brand to inject additional capabilities for AI into various AWS services. Q, the service itself, is really what I would describe as a ChatGPT enterprise competitor. It connects to downstream resources. To me, it seems that it is very much powered by Amazon Kindra because of the way that the APIs are structured. If you look into the API design, it uses many of the same primitives and names as the Kindra API. That said, I don't know for sure. Amazon Q for Business comes out to $20 per month per user with a minimum of 10 users. And it covers business features and QuickSight. But then there's also Amazon Q Builder, which is $25 per month per user, and that includes business, QuickSight, developer features. And then Amazon Q and Connect and Amazon Q and Supply Chain are offered through dedicated plans for your contact centers and supply chain employees. If you're interested in learning more, you can scan the QR code on the screen. But overall, really impressed with Q, looking forward to its continued development. Here's an example of how it can engage in your day-to-day work. You can see as well that it is in the AWS documentation now and in the AWS console. It's lacking a little bit of account context and capabilities right now. That said, I expect it to improve over time and gain additional capabilities. Let's see, what this looks like in another 2 to 3 months. Going to go ahead and move right along just in the interest of time. Okay, so SageMaker got HyperPods, which are built for training, distributed training at scale. This will automatically go in and heal broken clusters. So let's say a node goes down or a GPU fails or something, it will go and spin up an additional one to kind of make the failure and instead of you having to restart that epoch of training, it will go in and replace the faulty instance and resume the training from the last safe checkpoint. There are additional capabilities in SageMaker across a number of different things. If I remember correctly, there were like 85 different SageMaker launches or something. But overall, continued improvement across virtually every layer of SageMaker. So really, really impressive work from that team as well. SageMaker Studio got an upgrade. So in addition to the Jupyter Hub capabilities, it's got a number of Jupyter Lab capabilities. It got a number of different an improved set of IAM Identity Center integrations. The one gripe that I sort of have with the SageMaker Identity Center, so the SageMaker Studio and SageMaker Canvas, is that they don't use the traditional AWS primitives when you are integrating with them. So it can become very difficult if you're an AWS administrator to then administer the SageMaker Studio and Canvas workloads because the cost controls, the IAM capabilities, they're not where they need to be. So at that point, if you're already having to learn and administer a new system, a lot of the AWS ecosystem integration becomes less valuable. So I would really strongly encourage the SageMaker Studio team and the SageMaker Canvas team to address that. It is definitely preventing adoption and kind of not the best pricing model for people who are long-term invested in AWS. So SageMaker Canvas got auto shutdown. Interestingly, this doesn't work. So we were trying it just the other day, and we were unable to get the auto shutdown to actually shut down an instance. So I'm curious and hopeful that this will improve soon. Canvas got additional capabilities to talk to downstream data sources like MongoDB. This makes working with machine learning models much easier for business users. So looking forward to continued improvements here. Amazon Personalize got some additional capabilities. It got a LangChain integration. It is now able to suggest the next best action. This capability in our experiments was pretty solid. So we have I don't have anything else to say other than like this just works. So I was pretty impressed. Amazon Transcribe now can do auto language detection for multilingual real time audio streams. There's toxicity detection, and Amazon Transcribe Call Analytics now has generative call summarization. So there's a couple of different capabilities in there. There's the real time analytics, and then there's the post call analytics, and there's a different pricing for each of those. But Amazon Transcribe Call Analytics is pretty powerful, and if you had examined it originally, I think it would be cool to. I would strongly urge you to go back, give it another check out. AWS Health Scribe. So this is really just the combination of transcribe, comprehend, medical, and provided through a single interface. So while this is offered as a separate service, it is just the combination of those two services from what we were able to tell. If someone at AWS wants to correct that, I'd be interested in learning more. But to me, it just seems like a nice interface and a nice kind of overlay on top of those two underlying services. Amazon Lex got a number of new capabilities, and one of these is very important to talk about. It's the Q&A intent. So these capabilities are powered by generative AI, and they are one, descriptive bot building. So you can use language to synthesize the set of utterances, the set of intents, and things like that, as well as slot resolution assisted by generative AI. And then the Q&A bot. So this is in preview, the Q&A intent. Right now, if you wanted to have Lex go out and talk to Bedrock, for example, you would have to use what's called the fallback intent, which technically triggers an error in Lex. With this Q&A intent, it no longer follows that error path and instead follows a generative AI path. And this is, in my view, how eventually, hopefully, Lex and Bedrock agents will kind of interoperate. Amazon Monotron got some additional sensors and capabilities. We don't really deal with this here at Kaylant, and I don't deal with it in my day-to-day, so I just included it for completeness. Okie dokie. I'm going to take a sip of water, and I'm going to look for questions, and then we're going to go over some global figures and updates. Feel free, anybody, to ask whatever questions you want. Okay. So, global infrastructure. There are now 32 launched regions, more on the way, 102 availability zones, 36 local zones. And I'm sharing some secret sauce here regarding local zones, which is we have found that the spot market in local zones is very attractive for certain instance types. So if you are looking for steep discounts on certain instance types, give local zones a look. Keep in mind there is a small premium that you pay in compute for local zones, as well as additional network connectivity. But otherwise, it's potentially a very good deal for latency sensitive workloads. 29 wavelength zones. As far as I know, in the United States, this is still limited to Verizon. Hopefully, we can get additional carriers for those wavelength zones soon. 115 direct connect locations. This is not a significant change from last year. What is a significant change from last year is that there are now 600 plus edge locations. There's still 13 regional edge caches, but this gives AWS access to 90 plus major cities, 47 countries. And then additionally, they peer with thousands of tier 1, 2, and 3 telecom peers. Peers should be spelled with an E, not an I. My bad. Any mistakes that you find in this deck are entirely me. Anything that works well is entirely due to our friends at AWS and other AWS community members. All of this is linked together by a mix match of 100 gigabit fiber as well as 400 gigabit fiber. And if you ever want to know what AWS's peering number is, it's AS16509. So global infrastructure, AWS continues to grow. They continue to invest in various projects, trans-Pacific, transatlantic cables, all good stuff. All right, kicking things off at Peter DeSantis' keynote on Monday night, he talked about the storage engine Grover, which powers Amazon Aurora. And this is something that I think is very important because it differentiates what you can build on-prem versus what you can offer in a highly capitalized cloud. So Grover is an engine which helps move around. It's an optimized storage system that kind of allows you to move around everything from memory pages to full-on consistent storage. Now, uh, this is something that you can only build at scale. You could only build inside of a something that is designed like an availability zone or a region, and it's very, very powerful in its ability to rapidly clone and move pieces of data, which helps separate the compute layer from the storage layer. How many times have you tried to spin up an Aurora replica and it comes up quite quickly? Part of that is because of this Grover engine. There's a lot of great talks about this all the way back to 2017, I think. If you Google Aurora storage engine, you can read the paper. But I think Grover is really cool. It was nice to hear Peter DeSantis talk about that. So great job to the Amazon Keynote team and Peter DeSantis for sharing. Additionally, they announced Caspian, or they revealed Caspian, I should say. And Caspian is a combination of innovations that span both the hypervisor and heat management planning system, like the software heat management planning system, and some changes into database engines as well. So what it does is it allows cooperative over subscription of underlying hardware. This is particularly helpful in serverless or multi-tenant environments, and you get all of the same security and isolation of a hypervisor, uh, but you can also cooperatively oversubscribe underlying nodes. Um, if you want to learn more about both Grover and Caspian, I'd strongly can encourage you to go and watch Peter DeSantis's keynote. He dives in much deeper. Additionally, there's Amazon TimeSync service. So I first wrote about this, I think, in 2017 when we launched it, and I think we helped the development of like CronyD and a couple of other services to basically improve TimeSync in cloud environments. And Amazon has a team that continues to improve TimeSync, and they've basically been able to realize, beyond microsecond, beyond millisecond latency, microsecond latency. So they can now provide a standardized synchronized clock to within a few nanoseconds anywhere in the world that's accurate to like a billionth of a second, or well, a couple billionths of a second. And each rack has a local atomic clock, which helps maintain accuracy if satellite connections are interrupted for any period of time. This is, to me, just a really fun, fascinating part of AWS. This is the stuff we don't get to see that often. Again, Peter DeSantis covered this very deeply in his keynote, so I'd strongly encourage you to check it out. Like I said, the TimeSync service is now improved. Okay, so I'm just going to check as we move into this next session if there are any comments or questions. Feel free, folks, if you have any questions, to jump right in and tell me what you want to know. I don't see anything. So everyone must be just completely blown away by all of the information. Just checking again that I'm not missing anything. Nothing. Okay. So jumping into compute. All right, so we have AWS Graviton 4. So the fact that they're releasing a new generation of this every 1.8 years, they're right on track with Moore's law. But Graviton 4 chips are available in preview, as I understand it, and they are, I think the key thing here is that these are 128 core or 128 vCPU machines. They have true multi-socket support. They have great performance for database applications, for Java applications, and part of that is due to the gigantic cache that they put on each of these cores. So if I remember correctly, it's something like a 1 megabyte L1 cache per core, or maybe it was 2 megabytes, but that's just really, really big for an ARM processor. And there's a lot of interesting things happening there. There's also Trainium 2, which we talked about a little bit earlier, 65 exaflops of on-demand supercomputing performance. So this is also in preview or coming soon next year. And very excited to get my hands on one of these and just sort of do some benchmarking. We also got the CEO of NVIDIA on stage at reInvent and walking through the new GPU types that are available on AWS. So there's the H200 GPUs. There's also the L40S and L4 GPUs. The G6 instances are very, very cost efficient. The P5 instances are very, very powerful. So, I would explore both and see which one is really needed for your workload. For many smaller fine tuning workloads, you can actually do just fine on the G5 and the G6 instances. There's also the announcement of the U7i instances. These are great for SAP HANA customers or customers who want to run the biggest Minecraft server they can. And you'll see that they come in, 16 terabytes, 24 terabytes, and 32 terabyte RAM variants. This is DDR5 RAM, and they've got 896 vCPUs. Overall, very, very impressive, super cool. You could run a mean game of Minecraft on these. So these are on Xeon Sapphire Rapids, and then they have up to 100 gigabits per second of throughput to EBS as well. And then also ENA Express support, which we will talk about a little bit later. And then, we'll talk about some of this other stuff later on. So the R8G instances are powered by that 4th generation ARM CPU, the Graviton 4. And these are just going to be powerhouses. One of the things that the Graviton 4 does that's different from the previous generation is the dedicated cache for every CPU. Oh, I've already talked about this, I think. There's also always-on memory encryption, which was there in the previous generation, better branch target identification, and basically security at every layer. So support for pointer authentication and all kinds of other good stuff. All right, ENA Express expanded dramatically. So if you think about what ENA Express is, it is a layer that exists between you and your network, and it lets you take advantage of a UDP-based protocol called SRD, or Scalable Reliable Datagram. Calling it UDP-based is probably not quite right, because it is a sort of an evolution of UDP. So these two protocols, TCP and UDP, basically used to exist because TCP was reliable transport. It would do a SYN, it would do an ACK, it would basically confer some form of reliability to an unstable networking layer, whereas UDP was used for sort of fire and forget kind of workloads. Now, as the hardware and reliability of the underlying network has improved, it is possible to make multipath, multi-routing protocols using like UDP datagram style capabilities in a lot more places. So, a traditional EC2 instance has a single flow network bandwidth of about 5 gigabits per second. ENA Express ups that from 5 to 25, which is really, really powerful. Being able to take advantage of this without having to like rewrite a bunch of code or have to re-envision your whole networking layer is also very powerful. And it's now supported on every instance that's an 8x large to 16x large for MRCX and some other instance families. So I'd strongly encourage you, if you're network constrained or network bound, to check this out. It's also slightly more reliable because you're not stuck on a single path for certain networks. Anyway, AWS Compute Optimizer got some configurability, so you can adjust the CPU headroom and threshold preferences. You can have a 32-day look-back period, so pretty good. EKS pod identities, so this is the ability to configure how IAM permissions are obtained. It's useful, like if you think about how EC2 instance profile IAM roles work, this is the ability to kind of expand that functionality into your pods. Lambda scales faster, so One thing that I'd like to point out here is that yes, Lambda does scale faster, and everyone is very happy about that. But they also kind of curbed this by saying, oh, the default limits are going to be lower, just to kind of prevent people from foot gunning themselves into a situation they don't want to be in. So um, there are certain workloads where you probably still want to and pre-warn the Lambda team that you're expecting to have large spikes, and reserve concurrency can still be a very valuable tool. But this is going to prevent some of those internal noisy neighbor effects that you had from one function that's scaling like crazy while your other ones are still also trying to execute. Amazon Bracket. So if you want to take advantage of quantum computing, this was again addressed in Peter DeSantis' keynote on Monday night. This is one way to do that. We don't really use quantum computing at Calent, but I am interested in it, and I'd be curious if anyone has had any experience with Bracket so far. Moving on to networking, ALB got support for mutual TLS. This kind of offloads the work of TLS from the backend instances behind the load balancer, and very powerful, helpful kind of improvement, and really helps with IoT workloads or other kind of capabilities where you're distributing certs. Also, you got automatic target waits. So this is the ability to kind of shift targets over time. So let's say you have, instead of a hard down, you maybe have brownouts, or you have a series of 500 errors. Rather than just removing that instance from the pool entirely, it will remove it temporarily, wait for it to recover, and then put it back in. This requires turning on anomaly mitigation, but it is very, very useful because it's no longer dependent on the health check. So like if you had defined a health check to be at /ping on a Flask app, but then all of a sudden you were getting a bunch of 500 errors because that same Flask app lost connectivity to Redis or to a database or something, even though the health check was passing, if this detected a number of 500 errors coming from that machine, it would pull it out of the pool until it potentially recovered. And yeah, very, very powerful. Route 53 application recovery controller zonal auto shift. So this is the ability to basically go in and turn off AZs. So for those of you who aren't aware, ARC, or application recovery controller, is the expansion of the ARC control plane outside of just US East 1, so that you basically get a bunch of different endpoints that are spun up across regions that you can hit at any point in time in order to make changes in DNS. This is really helpful if you're super concerned about availability. This, combined with cellular architecture, can really give you the utmost in kind of performance, in reliability and disaster recovery. So the entry point pricing wise for ARC is something like $1,500 for just one cell. So I would encourage people to not turn this on frivolously. This is when you have a workload that really can't go down. An example of this is one of our customers is responsible for doing ambulance dispatching, and they leverage this alongside some cellular architecture and EKS improvements. Project Kuiper is Amazon's satellite network. They've just launched, I think, the first couple, and they've established that the 100 gigabit optical link works in space, which is great. These connect with ground stations, and then you can use that to communicate. I would say that this is very much a forward-looking announcement and isn't really ready for prime time yet. IAM Access Analyzer got a couple of additional capabilities, so it can now check for... First, it uses automated reasoning, which is great. They've been talking about this at reInvent for a number of years. There's a great series of talks from reInvent that I'll link to later on about the automated reasoning stuff, but definitely check that out. Very, very cool, interesting deep dive on how that team verifies different access. So it can now identify permissions that are at risk. It can say which permissions are overly permissive and which ones you might want to have be less permissive. And one of the things that it does is it surfaces these findings to Amazon EventBridge and Security Hub and all of the other good things. So you can review all of this in one place. IAM Identity Center got a couple of additional capabilities by being able to propagate or federate its identity into some of the downstream services like QuickSight, Redshift, EMR, Lake Formation, and Amazon S3 via S3 Access grants. Overall, I'm very bullish and happy with the improvements in the servers. Excuse me, and I look forward to many more improvements. One of the things I'd love to see from IAM Identity Center is custom domain names. Another thing I'd love to see is dark mode. It's always good fun when I'm adding a new user or adding a new account and I go into IAM Identity Center and I'm blinded by the light. So dark mode on the console, that's my AWS wishlist request. Security Hub got a number of different capabilities. Really, the underlying capabilities are powered by different services. Security Hub is just sort of the place where you're reviewing all of those things. These are sort of like widgets on top of the widgets and filters and views on top of many of the other services. So talking about those other services, one of the things that Security Hub can do now is take in GuardDuty and Inspector and all of these other sort of cross-account, multi-region sort of things and make it easier to visualize those or address gaps by looking at SCPs and OUs and how those are applied. Really, these are all just kind of quality of life improvements. Most of these things should be identified in production workloads way before you have to go to Security Hub. And if you need help with that, come to Kalen. Okay, I'm going to take a brief little break here. Okie dokie. Like I said, this now includes the findings from IAM Access Analyzer and everything else. Amazon GuardDuty now can run agentless detection on EC2 workloads. It can also do detection on ECS workloads and AWS Lambda functions as well. Image scanning, things like that. And supports publishing those findings to organization-wide accounts. This one's really powerful. So Amazon Secrets Manager now allows batch retrieval of secrets. So if you think, if previously a practice that we saw basically was that people would go and take all of the secret in one JSON payload and then store that, even though they may not necessarily be related. And they did this because they wanted to get the secret in one network round trip. Well, now you can do the same thing by just specifying a prefix. This is a great quality of life improvement. So thanks to the, and also a performance improvement. So thanks to the Secrets Manager team for being able to launch that. Like we said, we looked at Inspector, we looked at GuardDuty. Just in the interest of time, I'm going to move right along here. Detective. Lots of great improvements on the security side. Okay, storage. So just checking in on any questions here. Okay, I see we have a couple of questions. My apologies for not getting to those sooner. I had the chat window minimized. Okie dokie. Can I run Is It a Hot Dog on Inferentia? You absolutely can. That's a very easy model to run. You could even just build that with Amazon Rekognition. Bedrock is the layer above the lowest layer who is naming these things. Well, if you think about it, the infrastructure is what? Yeah, no, I don't know. Seth Elliott. Seth Elliott is watching, and so I'd strongly encourage him and anyone who is watching this. Anything that I said regarding disaster recovery and arc zonal shift, auto shift, and all that stuff, Seth Elliott is the person to defer to there. He knows everything about it. And just scrolling through the rest of the questions. Sorry, I don't see everyone's name, so I'm just sort of going through and checking. The identity islands are getting worse. Yes, agreed. 80% of the time, it works every time. Love that. Someone says, Randall, we're here. Thanks. What's a few billionths of a second between friends? Super user datagram protocol. I like that. Sorry, folks, I'm just catching up on all of the different chats here. Okay, cool. Well, those are all the questions for now. I apologize for missing those earlier. I will keep a better eye on them going forward. Okie dokie. So Amazon S3 Express One Zone Storage class. So there's been a lot of discussion about this on Twitter. So there has been some confusion into what this is for. I think the sweet spot for this is going to be in the 128 KB to 512 KB range. This is basically saying I don't want to pay for all the API access. I mean, there's still some modest charge for API access. I just want to be able to talk to a single object store as quickly as possible. And then Mount Point, for better or for worse, is able to treat S3 as a file system without all the good, no A time, no M time sort of stuff. I think S3 Express One Zone, Mark Olson, who works Klant, put it very nicely. It's sort of the race to idle. So the cost per gigabyte of this storage class is high enough that it discourages you from using it full time or for whatever kind of like traditional S3 workload you would use. But what it is good for is if you are doing a lot of work with an object store in a brief period of time, and you want to be able to get that done at a lower cost as quickly as possible, this is the storage class for that. Also, I think it's pretty impressive that I think S3 came out, let's call it 15, 16, 17 years ago. I can't even remember anymore. The fact that they're still launching stuff to me is really, really compelling. So congrats to that team. Please keep launching new stuff. S3 Access grants us the ability to federate and propagate identity from IAM identity from Identity Center or Active Directory into IAM principals, and then use fine-grained access control on that. This is, basically the workflow is you have the AWS service does a token exchange with IAM Identity Center as the token issuer, and you say create token with IAM API. That token is then used in the S3 Get Data Access API, and a temporary credential is returned that maps to that directory user. And then you can have your IAM policies there for being able to access different things. And this works with some of the downstream services as well. Like I said, Mount Point got some capabilities. So, I think there's been a debate going on for the last several years about whether or not S3 is a file system. It's not a file system, but I think it is important that we expose the right primitives for customers to build the things they need to on S3. And Mount Point, written in Rust, it seems very performant and capable. And so I am glad that it's here. Additional acceleration for S3 Transfer Accelerator. EFS got a number of improvements. There's also a new class of storage for EFS, which is called the archive storage class, which I think is something like 90% off the cost of the other storage classes. So EFS infrequent access is still around, but the price is lower. So it still is attractive and useful for many workloads. And then there was additional performance and throughput improvements in EFS overall. EFS and FSX continue to improve and impress me. OpenZFS or FSX for OpenZFS also got a couple of improvements. I never want to manage ZFS wheels ever again. So I can't look at this stuff without like a trauma response from years of having to manage like complex ZFS systems on AWS GovCloud. Don't ask. The fact that there's a managed service that does this for me is great. And there's a number of different capabilities and performance improvements that were announced both before reInvent and during reInvent. So if you had looked at FSX for OpenZFS before and written it off, now's the time to go and revisit and see if these additional capabilities improve things. I don't really use ONTAP, but it also got additional performance improvement, and shared VPC support got better. And then there were some additional scale out capabilities added. Amazon Backup got additional capabilities as well as restore testing. So uh, I think I can't remember who said this. It might have been Corey Quinn, but you don't want a backup strategy. You want a restore strategy. So make sure you've got your kind of restore strategy in shape, and you can use AWS Backup to help test some of that. Just keep in mind, backup has some charges associated with it. There are certain things that are still probably better to do on your own. All right. And then we have AWS B2B data interchange. So if you're familiar with a company called Stedi, Stedi, they have been built on AWS and running EDI workloads for a very long time. This is AWS's managed version of that. Frankly, I would still probably use Stedi, but I think it's pretty depressing that we still use EDI at all. So I don't know. I hate that this exists because SFTP and AS2 should probably like go away at some point. Okay. And the fact that the world's financial system runs on these things just blows my mind on a day-to-day basis. ElasticDR got additional capabilities and some integration into Systems Manager. I haven't tried out any of these improvements yet, so I don't really have a comment on them. Okay, moving on to databases. And before that, I will just check the comments now that I know where to look. Apologies again. EFS needs to change its name to one of the FSX families. No, we already have like 8 different file storage systems under FSX. And then there's a joke about RSUs. Positive vibes only. And then Brian Tarbox. So someone asks, will the slides be available after? I don't know that I will be able to share these slides in this form just because this contains a lot of speaker notes that are specific to Kaylant. That said, I will try to come up with a redacted deck, but it's not going to be available right away. It's going to be a little while. All right. So Zero ETL. Had a whole discussion with some folks about this just yesterday. Zero ETL is an interesting name, and it's almost like we keep naming things for what they're not. Like we say, oh, this isn't SQL, so it's NoSQL. Oh, this isn't serverful, so it's serverless. Oh, this isn't ETL, so it's Zero ETL. Except many of these launches are actually they do have some form of transform in them. So as we talk about Zero ETL, first of all, I'm very bullish on the idea of Zero ETL and the capabilities for it. But keep in mind, like some transform is still warranted. So maybe it's more just like zero managed extract and load, and then some managed transform in there. That's a better way of thinking about it, in my personal opinion. Okay, so this is the ability Zero ETL integration for DynamoDB to OpenSearch. So this is using the OpenSearch ingest API. So if you're familiar with Logstash and how you would transform documents as they were coming in, the OpenSearch ingest API is very, very similar. You can kind of write this YAML file and it says, hey, this is the document. I want you to do these things. Really powerful. If you have a lot of downstream services or capabilities that you're building, the DynamoDB streams can still be potentially more useful here. But overall, I think this is a great kind of like easy integration, removes a lot of the muck and undifferentiated heavy lifting that we have come to expect AWS to do. There's also a Zero ETL integration from DynamoDB to Amazon Redshift. So this allows you to run high performance data and analytics on DynamoDB data. Basically what happens though is that instead of doing any form of like ETL, which might be useful in certain situations, this just shoves the entire Dynamo object into a super column in Redshift. That is not necessarily what you want. So in cases where you still want to do some form of transform, consider the Lambda streams still. Aurora Postgres to Amazon Redshift. This works really well. So we were in the preview for this, and Kaylant, we tried it out. I have no notes. This was really just a perfect implementation. So good job, Amazon Redshift team and Aurora team, I guess. RDS for MySQL. So very important. This is not RDS Aurora MySQL. This is RDS regular MySQL going into Amazon Redshift. So this is also a nice kind of quality of life improvement that allows you to skip all of these cron jobs and ETL pipelines and pay a small, modest compute cost to stream the logs and into Redshift and kind of get that query capability. OpenSearch can now go to S3. That makes perfect sense. Seems very straightforward. Elasticache Serverless got announced, and I believe this was actually mentioned in Peter DeSantis' keynote when they were discussing some of the things like Caspian. Whether or not this deserves the name serverless is not an argument I want to get into, but you can go on Twitter and learn more. And then there was Amazon Aurora Limitless Database, and this is basically sharding. So this is the ability to pick a shard key and say, hey, I want you to go and spread my stuff out over all of these different databases. Really, really powerful. Great launch. Really excited to start using this. We haven't had a chance to really dive deep on it yet at Calent, but I think it is going to be very useful for certain workloads and allows you to sort of, there's a lot of different scheduled scaling and other capabilities that might make a ton of sense here. So I'm excited to get access to it and start playing around with it. Knowledge bases for Bedrock we covered earlier, but you now have vector search in DocDB. Interestingly, this is not the same implementation. While DocDB is a wire protocol compatible version of MongoDB on top of some other data store, magic data store that AWS has, the vector search implementation is not the same as MongoDB's vector search. In my testing so far, DocumentDB's vector search vastly outperforms MongoDB's. That said, I'm going to do more experiments, more trial and error before I really back that opinion up. I'd like to have some hard data, but it can index vectors of up to 2,000 dimensions. And I think it's going to be a nice little powerhouse for DocDB. Vector search for Redis, for MemoryDB for Redis. This is just Redis with persistence. We can do tens of thousands of queries per second and can have up to 32K vectors per dimensions in a vector. And you can have up to 10 indexes and up to 50 fields in an index. Great launch. Excited to try it. Vector engine for OpenSearch. This is available in both serverless and regular OpenSearch now. And this is powered by Approximate KNN, and it has a LangChain compatibility, LangChain implementation, not LangChain implementation. You can access it in LangChain. There, that's the easiest way of putting that. Neptune Analytics. So this was another great launch from AWS at re:Invent. And this is the ability to go in and load data from either an existing Neptune database or into S3 and run different kinds of similarity searches or fraud detection, pattern finding, any sort of algorithm you might want to run, you can now run through the analytics side. RDS for DB2. So it is 2023, and DB2 is now in RDS. For better or for worse. And then there's blockchain. I'm not going to talk about it. All right. In terms of Code Catalyst and additional things, I'm just going to check on time and check on everything else here. Okay, cool. No net new questions. So Code Catalyst got an enterprise tier. This is just blueprints and a couple of other things. I don't know that this is how this compares to say Spotify Backstage or one of the other kind of implementations like that, but it is something that I think is worth exploring for your business. CodeWhisper, as we said earlier, got a number of enhancements. It got vulnerability scanning as well for the enterprise side. And then there's AWS Console to Code. Pretty disappointed in this launch, to be honest. It's only available for EC2, and there were existing implementations and open source capabilities here that I really think AWS just could have taken and contributed to or run with or bought even. Just having this output CloudFormation not that valuable. Terraform would have been an improvement. So there's an Australian gentleman who made Former 2 and a couple of other packages that, like Console Recorder, that I think are a little bit better here. Then Application Composer for VS Code. So this was an acquisition that AWS made, and this is now available inside of VS Code. And yeah, just in the interest of time, I'm not going to spend too much time going through this, but think about this as like maybe it's a chat with your infrastructure diagram. The downside of this Application Composer is that it does only output CloudFormation instead of other potential IAC providers. So there are some limitations there. Step functions got the ability to integrate with third-party APIs more easily. So you don't need a Lambda function to call certain endpoints. You still need a Lambda function for endpoints that aren't in that kind of set of things, and that need custom auth or transforms or things like that. Optimized integrations for Amazon Bedrock, as well as a new test states API, which makes it easier to debug and explore step functions. Also, App Composer integration, which was all very useful. SQS FIFO queues got, I think it was like a 7x increase in throughput, and automatic redrive. So that happened before reInvent, and it was a huge improvement in quality of life and the amount of code that you have to write. CloudFormation can now connect directly to Git repos, and you can publish changes, and then CloudFormation will go and update itself. Managed Service for Prometheus is now GA and has some additional capabilities. This is useful for people who are using that for time series. The SDK for Kotlin and Rust is now GA. There's also the AWS CRT, Common Runtime. Really bullish on CRT. I think there's been some cool things done there, and I am unsure if the Rust SDK is using the CRT at all, but I believe the other SDKs are. Management and governance. Config got a number of new capabilities. It's the ability to do periodic recording. So if you want to turn things off while you're making like large changes, you can do that. It also helps with the investigation of various resources, so that you don't need to be a coder to go in and do things. So you can use natural language and say like, show me all the EC2 instances with a security group, or show me all non-compliant S3 buckets, and it will write the query for you and then show you. CloudWatch got a couple of really cool capabilities. Particularly among that is the pattern recognition stuff. So you can now compare two different time series side by side in CloudWatch, which is very useful, as well as writing CloudWatch logs and metric insights queries with natural language. So you can say, show me the 10 slowest Lambda requests, and it'll write that query for you. And then you can say things like, which DynamoDB table is the most throttled, and it'll do that as well. And then there's a infrequent access logs class. This is useful for when you are basically collecting the logs for audit or compliance purposes, and not necessarily for a debug or live tail or other kinds of purposes. And this can help reduce your CloudWatch logs costs. And then there's application signal. So I mean, all of these things that CloudWatch launched, I've got a more detailed write-up on some of these in another place I'm happy to share. But the pattern recognition stuff is really cool, and being able to correlate different time series across each other and compare them is probably the biggest quality of life improvement that I've seen. There's also My Applications. This was announced in Werner's keynote. I don't really get what the value of this is over just a regular old CloudWatch dashboard yet. I think this could probably evolve into like an extension of the AWS console, but for now, still just sort of experimenting with this one, and I'll add more information as we get to use it more. But it only came out just a few weeks ago, so we haven't really gone too deep on it. CloudTrail got a couple of like one-click deployments into different data lake situations, so I can visualize CloudTrail in QuickSight, or manage Grafana, and I can use Athena to query CloudTrail lake logs. And then I'm just going to check on questions here. Uh, da, da, da. Da, da, da. Yes, someone says my applications feels like resource groups v2. It does use the resource groups API. Ian McKay made former 2 in console recorder. I knew his name was Ian, but I couldn't remember his last name. And yeah, he is the Australian to follow. He's an AWS community hero and generally a very smart guy. So I'd strongly recommend you check out what he says. Okie dokie. So, Control Tower got a number of different APIs. These actually launched right before reInvent, if I remember correctly, but these are landing zone APIs that allow you to make changes to landing zone programmatically. We do a lot of Control Tower work at Kaylant, and we had the opportunity to meet with the Control Tower and organizations team at reInvent. And, I've got to be honest, like progress on this stuff was really, really slow 2 years ago. But meeting with the team this year and also meeting with them last year, I am encouraged, and I do believe that these are primitives that we can come to rely upon for large scale management of accounts going forward. So looking forward to the continued set of releases from those teams. A bunch of new managed controls. I'm sure you saw right after reInvent, there was this pretty cool release of it's basically the ability to, in an IAM policy or an SCP, use the org OU kind of sub principle and things like that in a condition. So those are all nice. Systems Manager got a low code environment, so you can build runbooks and things through that. It looks like this. Looks quite a bit like the step functions console, but overall nice. Good for IT admins and folks like that who don't want to sit there and write a bunch of JSON. AWS Audit Manager got some new capabilities. There's 110 controls and 32 objectives. And listen, this is probably important for some people, but I just don't care about it. So we're going to keep going. Architected Tool got some new lenses and some lens catalog stuff. Cost optimization. So this one was pretty interesting in that they combined the billing, cost management, and all the consoles sort of into one. And then there was this thing called Kudos, which was this SA built project for deploying a dashboard built on QuickSight. It would take the CUR, the cost and usage report from AWS, and it would basically load it into QuickSight and have these pre-built dashboards. So it used to be you would have to launch this yourself. You'd have to set it all up. Now these things are available in one click through that cost hub. I think that's great. I think they did a good job. So thanks to AWS for making that easier for our customers. Redshift got some additional concurrency controls and scaling capabilities for CTAs. Redshift got multi-data warehouse rights, so you could have cross-account, cross-region sort of capabilities that were not previously easy to do, I would say. A lot of the ways that people got around this before is they would just replicate the write from the application side or the ETL side. Supposedly, this makes it easier. Redshift ML can now call out to LLMs and SageMaker Jumpstart. This is a little bit interesting because the input and the output data type for this has to be a super column. So you are limited in some of the larger kind of inferences and things that you can make. So super columns are now, I think, 16 megabytes total possible size. But so that's like 16 megabytes of JSON basically. You're still a little limited in like the fact that you can't query some of the other data. So you have to materialize certain information into those super columns. The CUR dashboard, like we said, in Amazon QuickSight, additional anomaly detection in Glue. MSK got support for M7G instances. Redshift got MDL support. This one's really cool because you can basically say, make the sort key auto. So instead of having to define what a sort key would have to be for a table, you can say, oh, just sort key auto. And this can really reduce the runtime of various queries. Incremental refresh. So this is really powered by Iceberg. So Amazon made a big bet on Iceberg last year, and they continue to double down on it. I think it's the right bet. I think Iceberg is a really nice format going forward. So looking forward to additional capabilities powered by Iceberg and all of the various services. Glue Catalog got multi-engine views. And then this was in, I believe, Swami's keynote, but it was a further discussion about how Redshift scales and how Redshift serverless scales using AI to inform what sort of workload patterns it needs to be on the lookout for to scale correctly. AWS Clean Rooms. So we talked about Clean Rooms last year when those were announced, and how it's a great way for adversarial co-opetition is how I would describe it. This is the ability to take differential privacy and apply it to those same sort of data workloads. AWS Clean Room's differential privacy right there. Data Zone got a couple of additional capabilities. We got the generative SQL editor in Redshift that takes natural language and turns it into SQL for you. Apache Iceberg support. Row-level security enhancements. So these are always really, really cool. So especially when you can take federated identities and bring them forward through to do some of the queries. Redshift serverless enhancements, as we discussed. Just in the interest of time, folks, I'm going to go really quickly here. And then the S3 access grants powered through are now able to talk through EMR. Their OR1 capability instance for OpenSearch, Redshift FGAC for nested objects, dbt adapter for Glue. So this one is very powerful, actually. So dbt Glue actually got published back in, I think it was 22. But this is a lot of people have been using dbt over the years, and Glue can still be desirable for a number of different releases, but lots of cool things there. Okay. Then moving on to Amazon Connect, lots of different releases here. So you've got better integration with your data lake. You've got no-code UI builder for the agent interface and for the customer interface. You got two-way SMS. I guess they're not doing this through Pinpoint anymore. I think they're probably just doing this on their own. And in-app web and video calling. I'm unsure of how the video calling is implemented. I'd really like to dive deeper on that when I get a chance. Agent productivity lookups, GenAI-powered customer data mapping, integration into some of the downstream providers that a lot of people use. This is most likely provided through AppFlow, but I'm unsure. Contact lens summarization, and then the Amazon Palm thing where you scan your palm is now available for enterprises in preview, so you can like scan your palm and get into places. It's interesting. Lots of IoT stuff. FreeRTOS has a roadmap now. Lots of migration stuff, mainframe modernization stuff that I don't know. Like these are the most boring workloads in the world. It's you guys ever find like people will say things about how hard it is to modernize a mainframe, and then you go and you look it up and it's just a bunch of like constants hard coded everywhere? Like I feel like that's a job for generative AI. Anyway, repost private. So this is your own Stack Overflow. Sorry, this is your own repost. Workspaces Thin client. So this is the this is an Amazon Fire TV that runs Workspaces and AppStream. And then that is it. We are about 15 minutes over the scheduled time, so I'm going to do a very quick look at the remaining questions. And Brian Tarbox says, the CloudWatch improvements may not be flashy, but they are huge. I agree with you entirely. And then Aidan Steele is another Australian that's very good. So listen to Ian McKay and listen to Aidan Steele. They're both great. And then any news on data transfer cost reductions, especially interested in those NAT gateways. Interestingly, VPC Lattice doesn't have an inter-AZ charge. So if you have VPC Lattice on, you don't pay the inter-AZ data transfer charge. I don't know if that's intentional or like what, but if you're looking for data transfer cost reductions, there's really only three avenues, and one is an egress waiver from AWS, which you would have to have substantial spend to be able to negotiate. But there's also that VPC Lattice thing for the inter-AZ cost to see if you can get that. And then someone asks, what is my number one favorite reInvent launch this year? That's a really good question. I'm going to bring Brian back on as soon as he gives me the thumbs up. I want to surprise him by turning on his camera and everything. And we'll just stay. Okay. There we go. So we'll just stay on here for a couple minutes and discuss some of the remaining things. I'm going to stop my screen share. What was your favorite reInvent launch, Brian?
Actually, the CloudWatch stuff, because I mean, we're supposed to say, "Oh, Gen AI and Q everywhere," but and that's wonderful. But when it's the middle of the night and you're trying to track down a problem, the CloudWatch stuff makes can make all the difference. The question, the related question I'd love to ask you, Randall, is what would you think of the theme of this year? Because like last year it was serverless, everything's serverless, even if it isn't. And this year you might say, well, the theme is everything's Gen AI, but I don't know.
I think everything is Gen AI was definitely the theme this year, for better or for worse. I was in a bunch of conversations. I met with a bunch of different AWS product leaders, and Gen AI was in virtually every conversation. What was my favorite launch, though? Damn, that's a hard question. Like CloudWatch, I want to follow on and say like the pattern recognition stuff is a huge boon, but I don't want to say the same thing as you, Brian. I want to come up with my own.
Well, two things. I think the Gen AI where you can the common theme of that you can ask CloudWatch or Redshift or a bunch of the other services, how do I do this? And it will just do it. That's amazing. That's getting to be where the computer actually is helpful. But the counterpoint, I think, to everything is Gen AI is Werner's comment that, old AI, ML, is still incredibly powerful.
And potentially more efficient than generative AI. Like the reasoning mechanism within a large scale transformer network is not quite as efficient as statistical validation of different things. If I were really hard pressed to pick one, I would say Bedrock Query and Retrieve API was probably my favorite launch.
Although agents might. I mean, I played with agents right before reInvent, and it wasn't ready. So I want to play with it again. But the ability for the models to reach out and actually do things, that I think that's going to emerge as massive.
I think so. The thing that I have with agents still, and this is a problem that exists in all generative AI. This is true of OpenAI. This is true of Anthropic. This is true of any of the underlying models. Is that we still don't have solid determinism. I think Llama 2 is the only one I can get solid determinism out of, and without deterministic output, I wonder how tool selection for these models is supposed to work. So I'm very bullish on agents, but I also think the more important problem to solve in the short term is determinism for these models so that we can begin to rely on them in a programmatic fashion. So I want to deterministically get JSON output every single time. I want to deterministically pick the correct tool every single time. That capability would unlock a lot of additional functionality in agents. But we have a number of customers where we're working on some really, really cool implementation. And pretty much every single time, determinism comes up as one of the limiting factors for going to production.
Right. But the thing is, I almost wonder whether we're likely to go in the other direction, because as these ML models start to exhibit more and more human-like characteristics like reinforcement, primacy, recency, and so on. I mean, when's the last time a human gave you the same answer twice in a row. As they become more powerful and more emergent, the determinism may be harder and harder to come by. But I totally hear you. I mean, I've worked at medical places where, I don't want to say, hey, give this patient, 2 mils of morphine. And it's like 2 grams of morphine, 2 liters of morphine, something like that.
Definitely. Well, let me go ahead and close this out because I know both Brian and I have a meeting to get to in about 10 minutes here. I want to say thanks to everyone who attended and listened today. We love this stuff at Kalent. Like this is what we do 24/7 is we're examining and trying to stay on top of all the news. I can't possibly be an expert on all of this, but I promise you there is at least one person at Kalent who has looked deeply at every single one of these announcements, except for maybe Monotron and the quantum computing one. We live and breathe this stuff, and our goal is basically to be the AWS experts, like the cumulative millennia of experiential knowledge across AWS. That's what we want to be at Kalent. We are your AWS LLM in some ways, but also I want to just close by saying thank you to all of the AWS engineers, SAs, and marketing folks, and AWS ambassador team, partner core team, and everyone who helped make all of these slides, as well as the AWS developer advocacy team that contributed to a number of these slides. And then also thanks to all the Kalians who helped build these slides. And with that, we'll close it out and we'll say thank you, everyone, for your time. And hopefully this recap was not useless. Hopefully it was useful. Bye.
Bye-bye.